We'll have a lot of time for Q&A.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
I'd like to welcome everyone who's come today to listen to the weekly Camaplan webinar. We're usually give people a minute or two to get seated, and I've got a little housekeeping, and might as well go through that while we're here. And I'm going to share screen real quick. And um, Peter, do me a favor and let me know if you
Yeah.
can see that.
I cannot. There we go. I see
Okay.
it now. Yep.
All right. So, today we're talking about a very interesting slice of the real estate market. If you've looked at things like mobile home parks and self-storage and land banking and all sorts of things, this is going to be pretty interesting. Uh, and I'm going to get into it in a minute after introducing our guest. But we do have a little bit of housekeeping. If I could just see my little arrows up here. There we go. It's a disclaimer, and lawyers have to have their say. And this is strictly for educational purposes. We can't endorse or recommend or promote any investment products. We are custodians and administrators. That's what we do here. We're not lawyers. We're not CPAs. We're not accountants. We didn't stay at a certain hotel chain. So, we always advise people to talk to their tax prep people, their CPAs, their lawyers if necessary, before they do anything with regard to self-direction. So I'm going to stop share here and get Peter. I'd like to welcome Peter Neal. He's an old friend of the company's. I've known him since his days at PPR, where he learned all the fundamentals of real estate investing, fund management, and capital raising at the hand of one of the masters or several of the masters over there. I think few guys over there that know what they're doing. And so he left to found GPS REI. He's a co-founder and he's a partner in it. And they've done more than 200 transactions. They've raised millions in private capital across multiple funds. So they're very experienced at that. He is the co-founder and managing partner of Hallowfield Development, which is an affiliated land development company. That's what we're going to talk about here. Basically, this involves controlling, entitling, and selling raw land for residential communities to national home builders. Among his clients are, and you'll recognize these names, Lennar, Pulte Group, Toll Brothers, Roos Chamberlain Home, and Burke's Home. So, Peter, welcome. It's great to have you back again. It's been a while.
Yes, Joe, it's great to be here and to be spending some time with the group and yourself. So honored to be back and very happy to be with you guys today.
Good, good. Do you have a slide deck you want to
I
go
do,
through?
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
I think I'm off the air on that, so you can go ahead and.
Hopefully it's seamless. I've been having. Okay, can you guys? No, can you see that?
I said it says you've started your screen sharing, so double click to enter full screen mode. That's me. Don't see it
Do
yet.
you see? Yeah, I've had this problem. I'll stop and then I'll do it again. For some reason, it takes two tries for
No
me.
problem.
Um, so, but I can keep talking in the meantime. So, so
Nothing
Joe,
like
you,
dead
you,
air, right?
you yeah, exactly. And it takes a minute for it to stop sharing. But okay,
All
now
right. We'll try it again.
usually the
Just
second time is the charm. I had a fear that was going to happen.
just as background for those of you who are here, uh, there is a backlog of, depending upon what sources you consult, anywhere from 5 to 7, some say even 10 million, a backlog of that many single family homes that need to be built. And what's kind of been holding things up is at this stage of 2025 is a little bit of interest rate anxiety and some other things, but that backlog is there, and so a number of companies have jumped into the pool to take advantage of it. And generally, they're in the Southwest or in the Southeast, and but here we go. But Peter is focused locally, so you're going to get an idea of how this can be done up here in the Northeast. So there's plenty of opportunity. Peter, take it away.
Okay, I just oh, I was just trying
No,
to get a full screen. It doesn't.
no pressure.
Slides. I like had a total loss of memory there. I'm thinking, how do I go full screen? Like I haven't done that a million times on PowerPoint. Okay.
All right.
All
There we
right.
go.
So,
All right,
so
you're
yeah,
on.
Joe, you hit the nail on the head. You hear different numbers thrown around, when it comes to the need for housing and the backlog from housing. But at the end of the day, after 2008, it just things slowed down and they just have not caught up to where they were prior to that. So, like you said, we're focused primarily in Philadelphia and specifically the Philadelphia suburbs, and I'm going to show some maps to kind of show you physically where our focus lies, that kind of thing, and show you some data too and some information on kind of the what the data shows is the backlog here specifically, because I think everybody realizes, if you're into real estate to any capacity, that real estate's local, so it's when you can look at the kind of national trends, and I think that helps from an investment standpoint to kind of looking at it, from a macro perspective to see where the trends are, what's hot, what's not, what's needed and all that kind of stuff. But it's also very important to always dial into the micro data as well. So we'll talk about that. But the purpose of today is to just introduce you to the land entitlement process. It's I think one of the most overlooked stages from an investor standpoint, and really creates the highest returns within the development. Everything that can be done from a development perspective, and I'm also going to put up some stuff on the screen to kind of show you the stages in the process of real estate development, because I think a lot of times when people think of real estate development, they just think of homes being built, apartments being built, commercial properties being built. But there's a lot that goes into the planning and the engineering and the zoning and all that kind of stuff to get it approved and ready to build, and then even like site work and things like that. So we'll get into all that. I got my own disclaimer, similar to Joe, right? So
He's
we're
got
going
the
to get
same
into
lawyer.
exactly. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA, right? I'm not making any offerings or anything like that. All of that gets done through, our Regulation D offering documents, which are available on our website. Hopefully, if my screen sharing works and all, I'd like to bounce out of this at one point and pull up a spreadsheet to kind of walk through some underwriting. I think that might be cool. So, the projections, right? Targeted returns, that kind of thing. We can't make any guarantees. So I always like to just start by saying thank you. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit here and listen, and ideally ask questions and things like that too when that time comes. So I can't thank you enough for being here. Really appreciate that. Joe, well, I'll walk through the little overview. So the goal for today is I really want you to just understand what the land entitlement process is, what that means when somebody says land entitlement. So I'll get into exactly what it is that we do and what we look for, because Joe kind of hit the nail on the head. There's a lot, even within the land space, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, from a lending perspective, from kind of flipping smaller deals to, the weekend, people that are going to go drive ATMs and things like that, or they're going to park a mobile home or an RV or something like that. And then to doing individual lots and building homes. And there's just so many different avenues within land, and we have a very specific strategy within it when it comes to the entitlement, and specifically to sell to national builders, that kind of thing. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about why I believe this to be a fantastic opportunity, especially in today's market. It's pretty much always needed, but this is what feeds, builder pipelines and things like that. But we'll talk specifically about some of the things that are happening in today's market, and some of the kind of the trends, looking outwards, that's making this a fantastic opportunity now. That'll lead to the returns, and that's hopefully when I'll be able to pull up that spreadsheet. And then we'll talk about the risk. We're going to obviously, like any real estate investment opportunity, any investment opportunity in general, there are risks, and I want to highlight those and talk about some of the ways that we mitigate those risks. And then we'll have hopefully plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So just a short little introduction on me before I get to, what is land entitlement. Joe really hit the nail on the head. I got my start at PPR Capital Management. Back then it was PPR Note Company. They were doing all second mortgages and first mortgages. So I was not only introduced to the note space, but also kind of working alongside Dave. He introduced me to the real estate investment space in general, running Strategic Investor Alliance back in those days. We had all kinds of investment opportunities come through, working with hundreds, probably well over 1,000 accredited investors over the years, talking to them about what they're investing in. Just getting a lot of feedback on the different deals that they're in and funds and things like that and all. But a lot of my background has been in residential, specifically single family. I left PPR and co-founded GSPREI, which has been really focused on single family, specifically workforce affordable housing. And what we've done over the last going on 6 years has been acquiring distressed single family homes, so existing homes, and then fixing them up to lease, primarily to lease to a tenant. And then we do sell some property as well. So I think one of the big things when we talk about affordability is such a big thing right now and all, there's two different ways of looking at it. There's existing homes out there that need renovation that we could be bringing new supply to the market. So that's really what we do with our income fund and what we've been doing over the last 5-6 years, and even before starting that and all. There's a place for that that's necessary in order to make a dent in what Joe was talking about when it comes to the 7 million, whatever the number is, on how many homes and units are needed. And then obviously creating new homes totally, from builders bringing new stock into the market is a big part as well. I could make the case, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me, the only way we're really going to solve the affordability crisis in this country is through more supply. There's the 50-year mortgage thing's out right now. A lot of people have different opinions on that. I think some people lose their minds on stuff like that and all. Coming from the mortgage space, the average person typically only keeps a mortgage. I think it's like 5 to 7 years or something like that. Most people only live in their homes for about 8 to 10 years or so. So I don't think they're going to have most people aren't going to be holding a 50-year mortgage forever, that kind of thing. But if it helps with affordability, $200, $300, whatever it is, that's a big deal for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, that's just the Band-Aid. That's not going to solve the issues here, right? What's going to solve the issues is more housing. So that kind of leads into, what is land entitlement? It's the first stage in creating value within the real estate development process. It's what really unlocks the value of raw land. And specifically what it is it's the process of obtaining all the necessary approvals and permits required by the local municipality. So where exactly the municipality that land is located in, the county that the municipality is then located in, the state, and then third-party regulatory agencies, which are PennDOT, like traffic and water sewer authorities and things like that and all. So it's just obtaining all the necessary approvals and permits from those parties to develop, in our case, a new residential community. This is the case for any new development, though. It could be commercial, it could be a warehouse, it could be a shopping center, retail, a strip center, something like that, office building, you name it. They all go through the same process at the end of the day to getting all the necessary approvals and permits by all those parties in order to build. So that's what land entitlement is. This looks at kind of the real estate development process as a whole. I think this is an awesome slide to kind of show, to put a mental image in everyone's mind of what we're doing here. It starts with raw land, and then it ends with a finished community, right? And I think what a lot of times people, when they think of real estate development, they just think of that vertical development, the construction of the home or the building. There's a warehouse being built a little bit down the street from me now, and you see the warehouse going up. You see the foundation being laid and the walls coming up and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people, when they think of real estate development, they just think of that. But there's so much more before that happens. Just right before that, there's the site work that has to happen. So doing all the groundwork, improvements is another name that you hear for that. That's the constructing the roads, the sidewalks, the grading, installing utilities and things like that. That's called, you hear it called improvements with an I. Horizontal development is another name for it. But before any of that can happen, there's the entitlements. So the entitlements, like we said, that's the approvals and the permits. It's getting all the approvals and everything necessary in order to do that site work and all that kind of stuff. So our focus here is really just in that phase. You know what I mean? So we want to secure the property through an agreement of sale. At that point, we control it. There's a due diligence period, and I'll get into kind of some of the details here, but you take it through with the municipality and state and those parties to secure all those entitlements, and then at that point we've created that value. At once we have record plan approval and we have all the necessary approvals to move forward, at that point we want to sell to another developer or to that home builder who then is going to do the horizontal development, vertical development, and from there they'll sell or they'll lease depending on what their strategy is. So our core focus is really that beginning, finding a piece of raw land, getting it under contract in order to control it, taking it through the entitlement process to secure all those approvals. And then once we have them secured, which will typically be called record plan approval, that's when we will sell it to a national builder. So exactly what do we do? You know, it all starts with finding the raw land, and there's a number of ways that we can do that. Like near anything in commercial real estate, the good deals probably aren't going to be online, right? You know, you're not going to find good deals on LoopNet or in CoStar or Crexi or something like that. For the most part, you know, a lot of those deals have been looked at, and there's a reason for them being there. You know, either the price is ridiculous, the seller has, you know, different, they're not willing to go through to put the property under contract and go through a period of getting securing the entitlement and the approvals and stuff like that. So a lot of times, you know, you really need good broker relationships, as well as a strategy to go direct to sellers. And I got my start in the land entitlement, land development space, working with a local broker who was a broker developer. So he made his money, you know, brokering. It was all commercial deals, doing leases and selling buildings and things like that. And then he always had land development deals in the background. He was really the one that introduced me to it. No construction. He didn't want to do any construction at all. Everything was just entitle and then sell. So somebody like him, if he's got a deal, he's going to keep it himself. You know what I mean? Like, but not all brokers are like that. Not all brokers want to do that. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll call the people they know, the people that have capital, the people they have a relationship with, that kind of thing. So it all starts with good broker relationships, having them understand what it is that we want. And then, you know, keeping in touch with them to make sure when they get something, they bring it to us before they bring it to other people, hopefully. And then from there, you know, going direct to sellers. So there's a number of ways to do that with utilizing a couple different systems and things like that in order to get seller information. And then phone calls, text messages, postcards and letters, you know, even door knocking and that kind of stuff. I did that. That was really how I got started with working with him, was just we were knocking on doors, driving around, looking for potential opportunities, then going back to the office or right there in in the app, identifying who the owner is, and then finding phone numbers and addresses and things like that to just get in contact with them and explain to them what we can do and try to find out where they are, that kind of thing. Where we're looking, and I have a map that I'll show you in a little bit, but Philadelphia suburbs is really our ideal location, you know, the surrounding counties to Philadelphia. So we don't want to be in the city of Philadelphia. We want to be in the surrounding suburbs of it. It's Montgomery, it's Chester, Bucks, Delaware, and then a little bit further out into Lancaster, you know, like Amish country, Berks. Then a little bit further up into Lehigh, Northampton counties. There's certain pockets of southern New Jersey that we like as well as Newcastle County, Delaware. That's kind of northern Delaware, so it borders Pennsylvania, as well as northeastern Maryland. Through the income fund and what we do on our existing redevelopment strategy, we do a lot in Baltimore, so we know Maryland very well. And the northeastern part is almost kind of like a part of Pennsylvania in some ways. I mean, it borders the lower end of the state there. Typically for size wise, you know, we're looking at a minimum of 10 acres. Ideally, we want to be closer to about 30 to 70 acres or so. When you're dealing with national builders, we kind of want to be in a sweet spot where the project isn't too big where they're going to want to phase it out. It doesn't mean we would never do that. But if we could stick to in that 30 to 70 acre range or so, that's usually going to yield a certain amount of lots, maybe, 30 on the low end if it's a super low density a property with, low density zoning. Um, or it could be 100 150 or something like that on the higher end if it's maybe townhomes or just higher density. And projects in that range, especially like the 75 lot range or so, a lot of national builders, local builders will take those down in one swoop instead of phasing out the project and buying it in two or three phases, that kind of thing. Same with if you go much under that, even 30 homes. If you're in the suburbs of Philadelphia, probably not going to have a hard time selling those. But if you're a little further out, maybe you're in Lancaster, you're in Amish country, that kind of thing, it could be too small for them. You know what I mean? So then you're going to work with regional builders that would definitely come in and take that down in one shot, and do the horizontal and build the homes, that kind of thing. Public sewer, public water is a big thing in this business. It's preferred. It's not 100% necessary, but it's something that's going to add expense. It is expensive to get those out to a project. So it's always preferred. Anything with on-site septic, typically a national builder's not going to look at that unless it's a really desirable location. So plenty of regional builders will, that's how they're competitive, that kind of thing. But, for the most part, it's one of the first things you're looking at in the space. And it's always preferred if the site has access to it already. Or there's at least, it's close by, it's across the street or something like that, or right down the street. And even then it's expensive to get it there. So it's always preferred. Um, having it zoned some bit residential in some way by right is always preferred. You know what I mean? So that there's no need for rezoning or anything like that. That's always preferred and always going to be the quickest route to getting your record plan approval. It's not always the case though. There's a lot of times some of the most profitable projects will be those ones where you're going to have to rezone. To give you an example, now we're looking at a deal that a local township owns, and it's zone commercial. It was an old landfill, but they have a massive willingness to rezone that to residential. So like that's a project that we wouldn't shy away from. So if there's a willingness there and we're having conversations, there's another project like that now too, where there's some conditional use and things like that. But the municipality has shared a willingness to get that rezoned. Sometimes that's just through conversation, or they have that in their comprehensive plan or whatever it may be. They're the kind of projects that you want to work on. We're not looking to tie something up that's just, commercially zoned. It's an office building or something like that. And then we're going to potentially have to sit for years trying to get that rezoned, unless of course we can get a fantastic price on the property. Because that's kind of where those opportunities come in as well. There's a huge opportunity right now in old office buildings and industrial properties and things like that, where the current zoning does not have any residential aspect to it. But the commercial zoning is no longer highest and best use, and they're sitting vacant, and they can't, and typically in those cases the bank forecloses. That's when those opportunities become real. So yeah, just to go back, it's preferred that there's residential zoning in place, but it's not completely necessary.
What does that add in terms of time and cost if you've got to go to rezoning? I know it's going to vary, but
It's going to
depending
vary.
on who you're
Yeah.
dealing with,
It
but
could, yeah. If residential zoning is in place, you're probably looking at 2 years, 2 to 3 years on average of getting to record plan approval and getting all your approvals. If you need to go through a rezoning, it's probably going to be 3 to 5, and it could be
wow.
even longer than that. It depends on how much the municipality wants it. In cases where the municipalities is asking for it, or they have it kind of planned in their comprehensive plan, but they just haven't changed the zoning yet for whatever reason, it could be quicker than that. But it's going to depend on a lot of different factors, and we'll talk about some of this too from a risk perspective, because all that going into it. I think that's one of the
Mhm.
really cool aspects of this business is it's very incremental, and you can spend no money in some cases to find out a lot, and then you can spend little bits of money to find out more to some of the questions you have there around that from a zoning perspective and how perceptible. And just because somebody in the municipality tells you that they want to change, that they're perceptible to, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be either, or they're going to
Right.
still be in that position, 3, 5 years down the line, that kind of thing. But that would be 100% reflected in the price as well. I mean, that's typically going to be the highest yielding projects because there's that kind of level of hair on it. And there's a lot that we could probably talk a whole webinar on that. It's strategies around getting those projects approved, because typically they don't, whatever the existing zoning is, like that warehouse, that down the street from me, people didn't want that, but they didn't
Mm.
want the residential either, and it was zoned for the warehouse, so they got it. I mean, they couldn't do anything about it.
Mm.
But they did get a low impact. It's a small building on a very, very, very big piece of ground. So, desirable schools, just like anything in real estate, the better the school district, the better the location, the more desirable it's going to be. So, we're always looking at school district. We're looking at the proximity to employment centers, as well as, highways and just kind of access to getting to the property, that kind of thing. And as we kind of said before, we're certainly not afraid to take on projects that have hair on them. That's really where the opportunity is. And builders in general don't want to be land developers. They're builders. They want to just build and feed their building machine. So anything that has any bit of hair on it or anything like that, they typically, they would rather somebody like ourselves, a land developer, go through that process. And that's what makes them so valuable at the end of the day and really unlocks that value. Because especially if it's in a good location, they will pay a very good premium in order to get that property once you've gone through the approval process and done that work, the heavy lifting for them.
Do
Um,
you do you do
mhm.
you have to deal with the environmental issues? Supposing there needs to be some remediation, soil remediation, for a plant that produced heavy metals or something like that that was on partial part of the property. I mean, you run into that situation. What
Sure.
do you do that
You could.
or
It's all negotiation. I mean,
right?
so the existing owner could do it. We could do it. There could be outside agencies and things like that where there's money available and stuff like that. It's all a negotiation at the end of the day, and it all goes into your underwriting to whether or not how you're going to negotiate that on who does what and all is all going to be part of the price that you pay and kind of the risk profile that you look at overall on whether or not to move forward, that kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
it's not like a black and white cut and dry thing.
Okay.
Um, all right. So what exactly do we do? I kind of alluded to this in some of the conversation beforehand, but we put the land under contract. So we're not closing on the land here. We're controlling it through an agreement of sale. And within that agreement, we've negotiated a due diligence period, and then from there, an entitlement period. And from there, once we've secured record plan approval, we're selling it to the national builder. So we're never closing on the property. Our only expense is deposits and the entitlement expenses, which is mainly engineering and legal. I mean, they're usually your two largest expenses at the end of the day. So you put it under contract. Before that, there's a lot of analysis that goes into even that. You know what I mean? So this, you don't have to spend any money. It's just analysis on the property from a market perspective, from a zoning perspective. All that information's public, and pretty much all the places that we're playing in is just an easy Google search that'll get you to a E-code 360 where you can read all the zoning codes yourself and kind of decide from there, make a decision on what you think is what is approved, what the zoning says or doesn't say on what you can get, from a lot yield perspective. You're also going to confirm that with an engineer. That's typically going to be during the due diligence period, though, just to get another opinion to make sure they're reading it the same way that you are. And then there's the underwriting process and all. So just kind of looking at, here's the price that's been thrown out. Looking at, you kind of know some of the topography and geological issues and any wetlands and things like that just by looking at the site, and going there, looking at it on Google Maps and things like that and all. So there's a lot that can be done from a analysis and underwriting standpoint before any money is spent whatsoever. And then you put it under contract. That initial deposit's is a soft deposit. So that's completely refundable if you don't move forward. The only really hard cost in the due diligence is the due diligence itself. You know what I mean? So getting your phase one environmental, maybe getting a sketch plan done, from a land planner or an engineer to kind of shore up, what you were thinking on the zoning and what you think the lot yield could be. And then depending on the project, there could be a few other, expenses that you have. Typically, that expense is going to be between ten to $30,000. So it's not a massive expense, but that's going to tell you a lot on whether or not you want to move forward with that project. And then from there, there's usually another deposit. So if you say, all right, we're going to move forward, green light, what we're seeing in our initial due diligence and the underwriting and all that kind of stuff. You're also going to talk to people in the municipality and things like that during that due diligence period. That is just your time to try to find out as much as you possibly can. On the low end, if it's a really desirable project, you might get 60 days due diligence. Usually you want as much as you possibly can. So 90 days, if you can get 6 months, as much as you possibly can is great. You don't need all that time. It depends on the project. That kind of thing. But with a reasonable amount of time, you can find out a lot, and that's going to kind of tell you whether you should green light or red light. From there, there's going to be it's going to go into permits and approvals. That's when you're really going to start to work with the municipality, the engineer, bring in legal, all that kind of stuff, in order to secure those permits and approvals. And then once they're all secured, that's when we'll sign the land to the national home builder. So,
Do you go into these things with a target purchaser in mind? I mean, based on the say that the likely, the piece of property to begin with, the demographics of the surrounding area, the employment opportunities, all the things that you mentioned in this sort of environment around the property, and the type of structures that are likely to be built there. Do you go into this saying, "Oh, this is going to be a perfect piece for a regional builder
yeah,
X"? Yeah, okay,
100%.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
yeah,
actually
yeah, all right,
leads
all right.
perfectly into this slide right here. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
yeah. So we're kind of
you're
looking at
welcome.
these. Yeah, it was a great transition. We're looking at these people on the screen as well as a lot others. So where it's located, you already, and that's another part of like the underwriting and the due diligence is kind of seeing what other projects are going on, and we could probably talk more into that. Because when I pull up the spreadsheet, Jesus, time's flying by, and I made Joe, I could talk way too much.
That's all right. We don't shut it off.
Oh, okay, okay.
We go till
Um,
the questions are over. So
so that going in, on who's going to be interested, whether it's a national play or whether it's a regional play or whether there's really interest from both sides of the spectrum. And some land developers will actually get a contract from a builder right away.
that's what I'm thinking.
There's
Yeah.
not huge advantages to that, though. Actually, there's probably more drawback than advantages because you're locking in the price of those approved lots today. Whereas if you get to record plan approval and then put it out to all the players that and having them bid, 10 out of 10 times you're going to get a higher price at the end of the day. The other thing is that typically they're not releasing cash deposits, so they'll put it under contract, but it's typically like a corporate IOU. They're not really liable to have to pay you that deposit. So you could potentially, depending on how you structure it, at a certain point access that money. Typically when you've like secured zoning, you can access that money and then use that to fund the rest of your entitlement expenses, which would just increase your IRR at the end of the day because you're using their money instead of yours. But most times, and my experience and my friends and mentors in the space have always kind of leaned towards get to record plan, get to preliminary approval, put it out to bid, and you're always going to get a higher price than if you secure it right up from day one once you get the land secured, and have a contract right away with whoever the builder is for them to take the approved lots from you, that kind of thing. So and it's all and you're there. That's actually another thing I was going to talk about when I pull up the spreadsheet, because I wanted to get into like kind of how we underwrite and how we come up with our approved lot value and that kind of thing, because it's all, there's a process to it. But the big thing here that's like really kind of idiot proofs it to some degree is you're calling these people from day one, once you have it
Mhm.
secured, that kind of thing. And you're asking them, what are you paying for approved lots? You know what I mean? Like, and they'll be upfront with you. You know what I mean? They want to buy them, right? They're looking to fuel their machine, that kind of thing. So you can start to get ideas from them, and two, you're going to see comps as well, and look at what other projects are around, that kind of thing. that's a big part of the underwriting process that when I pull up that sheet, we could talk about. So yeah, ideally you're working with national builders. Regional builders are great to work with as well. Local is kind of, just those smaller mom and pop type shops. Regionals are usually going to be bigger than that. And then other developers. So there's also opportunity to sell the projects to another developer who's going to do the site work, so do the improvements, and then they would typically have a contract with the builder to once lots are getting finished, to then sell it to them. Land banks, which are typically connected to the nationals, so that's like Four Star, and I think there's another one we have on there, maybe Milrose Properties, Angelo Gordon. They're land banks that are connected to the nationals. So then sometimes some of the nationals don't buy approved lots directly. They buy it through their land bank, and then their land bank does the horizontal work, and then the land bank has the contract to them to deliver those finished lots to them. So there's a number of different ways that we could take it. And then even on the GSP side, I think one of the other reasons that we've been wanting to get into the space is that we could be feeding a pipeline for future deals for us, from apartments and from townhomes, kind of built to rent communities and things like that, where there's pieces of ground that we maybe wouldn't want to sell to a national builder. We would want to develop it ourselves and then continue to hold that as a rental, long-term rental like we do in our regular portfolios.
Hmm. Is there any, do you ever run into situations, I guess, if market conditions are right, that there's a bidding war?
100%. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
great.
yeah, definitely.
Great.
Definitely. The yeah, if you get the right project, especially in the surrounding counties and even outside of it too, where some of the regionals are playing, there's a lot of that going on because the nationals are very competitive with each other, and if they see one in a place, then they want to get there too, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of competition going on between the Lennars and the DR and Pulte and Toll Brothers and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that. Yeah. One of the reasons you just don't want to tie it up too soon, and get in bed with one of them too early on in the process. Your chances are you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Okay.
And they make those contracts ironclad where they can get out of it either way. You know what I mean? So it's just like if something changes on their end or something like that, they've always got their outs and things like that. And maybe there could be some bit of deposit that stays with you or something like that. But for the most part, they're not dummies. When they structure those deals. So, and those contracts. All right. So why land entitlement? I gave you one of the reasons there. I see this from a long-term perspective, getting into this side from GSP REI's perspective is that, you're getting in at the ground floor, at the end of the day, there's so many off ramps when you're getting in at raw land to take it to record plan approval and sell it there, to do the horizontal work and sell it there, to go all the way to vertical and build and sell and all that kind of stuff. They're kind of long-term vision plans, that kind of thing. Right now, there's a massive opportunity in just getting the record plan approval and then selling it to a national home builder. The builders, like I said before, they're not developers. They're always going to prioritize acquiring approved and improved lots, over them tying a project up themselves and going through the process with the municipality and the county and the state and all that kind of stuff. They're looking to feed the immediate need at the end of the day, and their immediate need is to build and sell homes. So there's a lot of opportunity to work with them. Now more than ever, there's massive supply constraints. Like Joe mentioned, it's on a national level, but it's on a regional, local level too, because there's definitely pockets down south where there's been a ton of development, where they don't have the same supply constraints that we have. I mean, they're in the opposite world. They're oversupplied in lots and that kind of thing. That's what I was saying before. It's so important to look at this stuff from a macro perspective, but also dial down micro as well, because different regions in different parts of the country and different parts of the state and even county and things like that, are going to have different supply constraints and or lack thereof supply constraints. I mean, that kind of thing. So, and even like the city of Philadelphia compared to the suburbs, jobs, and it's just there's a lot that goes into that from a local level, and I'll speak to some of those specific numbers in a second. But at the end of the day, there's massive supply constraints of homes like we were talking about before, and that's why we do what we do with GSP with redeveloping existing homes, but then of lots as well, because you can't build a home without an approved and improved lot to build it on. And then there's massive upside. And that's why I want to pull up that spreadsheet to get into some of the underwriting and look at some of the deals specifically. The value that's created, getting those approvals for raw land is huge. And so we'll look at that in a moment. All right. So the need specifically to Pennsylvania, the data showing it's about 105,000 housing unit shortfall within the state. And that's compounding on an annual basis. Yeah, and so each year the production shortfall is between 10 to 30,000 or so. So we're not keeping up with the need, and there's potentially could be even more need coming down the pipeline. I don't know. Obviously, Camel Plans in Pennsylvania, but I know you guys could be the listeners could be from all over the country. There's been a lot going on in Pennsylvania. McCormick and Trump were talking about it. I think it was a little earlier in the year with $90 billion of an infrastructure investment made into the state. A lot of that has to do with data centers and things like that. Just infrastructure type development and investment into tech and that kind of stuff and all and AI. A lot of that is in kind of where we're playing in that southeastern corridor of Pennsylvania there. So it could just make those numbers worse. You know what I mean? Even if that wasn't happening, we have a shortfall and we have a shortfall now, and we have a shortfall that's compounding annually. But some of that, with that amount of investment and projects that are teed up and already being built and things like that from a data center perspective and industrial perspective and all that kind of stuff, it could increase. There could be more. That's going to drive more people because of jobs and things like that into the state. There's a lot of problems with Jersey and Maryland and Delaware and other things like that. Whereas from a tax perspective and that kind of thing, and Pennsylvania stayed pretty solid there. So it's becoming a very attractive place to be. So that really could just make the problem worse. Resi Club, which I have no affiliation with them, but if you guys do anything residential, you should check them out. They have great information nationally as well as stuff that you can dial into more local. They've got the inventory in Pennsylvania. It's 42% less than it was this time in 2019. So this was in June. I think they might have more recent numbers that are out too. It hasn't changed much. It might be 41% or something like that now. But that's a pretty significant number. I mean, so 42% less inventory on the market today versus the same time back in 2019. New Jersey's 62%. That's even more significant. Maryland, 37%. Delaware's actually the same, 37%. So and that's another reason, like, to look at things micro. You go down south to Georgia or Texas or Alabama, it's the exact opposite. They've got 42% more inventory. You know what I mean? And it's just a lot of it just has to do with they had such massive amounts of inbound migration, so they had national builders and developers, and then all kinds of people coming from, regional, and then all kinds of people, just investors coming in. So their inventory, housing inventory, as well as lot inventory, it tends to be a lot higher. Zonda, which is another, really good research company that's specifically for homes, new homes, that kind of thing. They just recently came out ranking the Philadelphia market as one of the most severely undersupplied lot markets in the country. So when it comes to inventory, it's a lot lower than it was. And it's not just existing homes; it's the lots that are needed to build new homes as well. And the thing is, like, I don't think I mentioned this in the slides before. We're focused on infill projects. You know what I mean? So, like, we're looking in the county, in the surrounding counties of Philadelphia. This is not a play to go out. You can find land all day long in the center of PA. Kind of, if you're looking at this map right now, you go to the center between, Pennsylvania on our side, Philadelphia, and then on the other side of Pittsburgh, and then there's everything in between. It's rural. It almost feels like the South when you drive through it. It's so different than how the suburbs of Philadelphia is, or compared to the suburbs of Pittsburgh as well. So you can find land out there, but it's tertiary. There's certain pockets. Like we have a project up at State College, where there's a driver, there's that demand generator, value generator in State College and some of the hospitals out there and things like that. And there's little pockets in Harrisburg and Reading and things like that. But for the most part, it's wide open, and there's good reason for it. There's the mountain ranges and things like that, and there's just not as much access to water and that kind of thing as you have on the far ends of the state. Our thing here is infill projects. We don't want to go out, and just tie up land and hope that development goes out that way or something like that. We want to be in places where the builders want to be and the builders already are. You know what I mean? This isn't because you do see those kind of, and usually they're called like land banking, plays where, you're buying hoping that years later, especially with those rezonings and things like that, sometimes you're hoping that the zoning and the development starts to head that way. This is not what we're doing. We're infill. We're looking for projects that are builders already are there, and they're making moves and that kind of thing. So they want to be there. Um,
I'm
so
glad you went into that because this area does have, for those of you not familiar with this part of the Eastern Seaboard, does have some unique dynamics. And I see this all over the country where, for example, workforce housing in Chicagoland, most people who think of single family home construction think of Georgia, Florida, and Texas. But specialists in these markets, like Peter and his colleagues are here, know this territory. They spent a good portion of their time over the last decade building a workforce housing portfolio, and they see this infill or backfill or whatever it is. I had lunch with them a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about it. It's doing the same thing that the guys out west are doing, but it's doing it in areas where there's intense demand. It can be smaller parcels of land.
yeah.
Yeah, but the opportunity is still there.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's not going to be as easy to find the land. You're right. You need to have those relationships. You from a broker perspective, you can't be afraid to be calling and getting in contact with the sellers, the landowners, any way that you can, because it is the built environment, and we do not have the massive tracts of land that the South has and all. So I think there's huge advantages there, that it is infill projects, and it's one of the reasons that we have the affordability problems that we have and stuff like that, so there's actually some advantages there from an investor standpoint, because some of these are really high end, and desirable markets to be in, and they just continue to be as people move from the city and into the suburbs. And as the suburbs, I always say, like, in 10 years from now, Lancaster is going to be considered the suburbs of Philadelphia. It just keeps expanding out and out and out, and people don't, I don't think, care as much of getting into the city as maybe they used to. You know what I mean? Like, my parents are from the city. We moved a half an hour. I could be in the city. I go to the city all the time. You know what I mean? I could be in and
Yeah.
out of the city. Hey, it takes me half an hour. If there's no traffic, I could almost be there in 25 minutes or so. I don't think the newer generations care as much. If they're 2 hours away or they're an hour and a half away, they don't get into it the same way that I think the older generations do. And sometimes when the little bit further out you are, the more affordable it is. The out sale on a home might be 300, 350, 400 compared to in the suburbs of Philadelphia where you're looking at 700,000 plus. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And depending on where the pockets are, because there's definitely parts of Montgomery County and Delaware County, and every county has its lower end and its higher end. But a lot of times, even the low end in some of those counties can be $500,000. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
because it's
Oh,
the
yeah.
built environment. It is scarce on the land side of things. And it's not just that you're looking for raw land too. You're looking for underutilized land. So, like I said before, like with an office building or industrial, there's opportunities for where right now it's not the highest and best use. It's being underutilized for whatever perspective. And sometimes that's one of the things we do when we're creating our list and things like that to go to find owners and things like that, is you're looking for a small footprint. So it might be a little house or a little building on a very large property. So that's a piece of it as well. So, okay, this is where I wanted to try to pull up the spreadsheet, and
Okay.
hopefully I got the kinks out of the way on the first share that didn't work. Oh, there we go. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, in an effort of time, I'll run through one of these deals. So the which one, oh, okay, it's hard to tell which one I clicked on. So Corby Road, this is a project in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It's in Chester County. It's Penn Township, Avon Grove School District, pretty good school district. It's about 150 acres and it's 241 active adult single family and combination of single family detached and townhomes. So this project for the 150 acres, the price is just over $9.2 million. So as I said before, I mean, that's just the land price. How much investment we would need in order to fund the entitlement costs would be about just under $1.2 million. So 1.1 and some change there. So that's good. Like I said, going to fund the legal. This is the pre due diligence. So a lot of that's going into just some environmental, some other kind of engineering, some wetland studies and things like that, and then some land planning, like getting a sketch plan and stuff like that, and all a little bit of legal on top of that. So that's kind of your due diligence expenses. After that, it gets into the planning and the design. So you say, okay, you green light, you're going to move forward, that kind of thing. The vast majority of the spend is going to be in engineering. A lot of that's is engineering, and then from there, there's some with kind of fees and things like that with the township, and then there's legal expense, and then the development costs, which is funding the operations with the team and stuff like that. A little bit of permitting, some of that we may or may not have to do because we're selling the project to the builder, and then from there some closing costs and some transactional fees and things like that as well. So what it all comes out to is about just like I said, just under $1.2 million. There's a lot of contingency built into this as well throughout the deal. There's usually it's going to be about 15% contingency built in, and typically we pad these costs a little bit as well, just to kind of give some wiggle room and stuff like that. So pretty conservative on that 1.164. That's the equity needed in order to
Okay.
fund the entitlement expense.
Okay.
So how you come up with the price of the approved lot, value. So that this is what we would be selling the approved lots for. So we've got it under contract at 9.2, a little over 9.2 million. We're into it all total approved lot costs. So everything combined is about 11.2 million dollars, just a little bit under that. And then the approved lot value, we would be selling the approved land. So once we got it record plan approval and secured all the entitlements, we would be selling this for a little bit over $21 million with a investment of like I said, just under $1.2 million. How we come up with this is it all starts with what's the average home sale is going to be in the community. So what is a home in that community going to sell for? In this case, it's $475,000. We're going into the MLS and we're looking at comps. What are other homes selling for in the area? Specifically, what are other new construction homes selling for? You want to look at kind of the overall market, that kind of thing. But for the most part, like I said, infill projects, so we're in areas where there's other communities that are being built and being sold, that kind of thing. So you're looking at what are the other communities, what are they listed for, what are they actually selling at? Because sometimes they could be two different things. With the inventory that we've had lately and the demand and that kind of thing, it's usually more. We've seen a lot of those projects. Joe, I don't know if you see this when you drive around where you're at, where it's starting as low as 800,000, and then they come out and they put the tape down. And it says now starting as low as $1 million. You know what I mean? Or 999. I mean, it's like that's what we've been
Especially
seeing over the last
around
couple of
here.
years
Yeah.
here. So you're looking at specifically what are those other new construction homes selling for? So we're pulling comps, primarily out of the MLS, but also just like I said before, it's like this is where you're having those conversations with the builders, the nationals and the regionals, and kind of who you have identified that would want to take something like this, and you're just asking them, you know what I mean? Like, what are you guys selling the homes for? What are they listing for? That kind of thing. What are they actually selling for? From there, you're going to take a percentage of this for your approved lot value. So that's what I'm sorry, for the finished lot value. That's typically going to be about a third of the cost of the home is going to be the finished lot what the value of finished lots would be. So just the improved land, and that ratio is typically going to be in the Philadelphia, surrounding counties. You're looking at about a third. I mean, so 33% of the finished of the average sale price is going to be your finished lot value. And so if you're selling finished lots, I mean that would be the value of them. So and that number, it could vary a little bit. You know what I mean? So typically in the surrounding counties of Philadelphia, a third is a good way to go. If you have a really desirable, have a friend who's selling something to Toll Brothers up in Bucks County. Bucks County's been like breaking all kinds of records on how, home sales and things like that. I think he's at 38% that he's selling it for. When you have kind of a more tertiary, so like the State College deal I was talking about, which is kind of out in center Pennsylvania, that I think we underwrote that at a 24%. So, and to be conservative, and we have a sensitivity model here as well. We put everything at a 28%. So we kind of have here's our real numbers. Here's what we feel this would actually sell for, and then we build a lot of sensitivity into it as well to kind of look at the downside. But a third is a good starting point. From there you're gonna subtract the site improvement cost. I mean, so what it would actually cost. This is kind of a breakdown here of everything that goes into the site work and what it would cost. We've got the experience on the team to come up with these numbers based on what they've done other projects for, that kind of thing. Here's another one where it's just a phone call to a site work contractor too. I mean, if you have a project like this, they're going to want your business. You know what I mean? So they're going to be, typically perceptible to sending them some certain information, and they're going to give you an idea of what the site work is going to cost to do the improvements on the project. Another kind of thing too, if you want a back of a napkin, you're usually going to be around 30 to 40%, maybe 45%. It depends on some, the size of the project and depending on, some specifics of the deal. But typically, the cost there is going to be about 30 to 45% or so of the finished lot value.
Do,
So
do
from
you,
there,
Peter, do you factor in, given the time horizon of 2 or 3 years, do you factor that 475, and particularly in Bucks County, is going to be 500 pretty soon?
yeah,
Do
we don't factor it in.
you don't factor it? Okay.
No, no, because some might do that, I don't think that's the best case. I mean, you got to
Right.
make the deal pencil in this market and not hope for appreciation on those. You're 100% right. Chances are there will be appreciation on it, but chances are other expenses are going to go up as well alongside of it.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So like site work costs and things like that could go up. Attorney fees, engineering fees, all that kind of stuff could go up as well. So typically you're just going to pencil it in today's market and then stress more for the downside than anything. So from there, you get to the approved lot value. So it's just the difference between the finished lot value, what it would cost to finish those lots. So the site work cost, and then that gets you to the approved value. You times that out by however many lots. In this case, it's 241. This had attention from nationals and regionals. This project was something we thought we could have taken over from somebody on the team's existing portfolio, but they ended up finishing the project, and they do have an agreement for this 21 million right now. So when you take into consideration the fact that you're not spending the money on the purchase price, what the net proceeds becomes is just about $10.2 million, and then like I said, equity on that is just about 1.2 million. So you're looking at an equity multiple at an 80-20 split to the investor. 80% is looking at an equity multiple of about just over 7x.
Hmm.
So I'll speak to, and there's a lot of deals here, and we're coming up on one, and I want to have time for Q&A. Like I said, there's a lot that we do from a sensitivity analysis. The biggest one is like I said, playing with that with the finish lot ratio. So instead of doing a third, we just drop it down to 28%, and even lower. Like I said, I think we did 24 on the State College deal to kind of just provide some sensitivity there, as well as just taking 20% off right on this value here. I mean, the approved lot value, just taking 20% right off of it. You know what I mean? Just to say the market's corrected or we ran over on budget or something like that and all. And you still get, pretty fantastic returns looking at it that way. So it's just kind of to stress the down case at the end of the day. I have a few other things I'll just mention from a risk perspective, and then we'll hop into to the Q&A. So there's a number of projects that we have in the pipeline right now, primarily throughout Chester County, up in the Lehigh Valley. We have the one out in State College. So there's, and we all of them are underrated. I can happily share this information with anybody that wants it. The slides as well as the spreadsheets themselves and all, because the slides just take screenshots of like a summary version of that. And then there's the pipeline goes beyond these kind of pipeline deals as well. Some of those are actually off the table too, because it was when we put the initial kind of uh, we looked at the initial pipeline when we were putting together a presentation and some of that as well. So there's a number of other deals that we have in the pipeline as well that we're actively negotiating. And these are things where you do have to move somewhat quickly. You know what I mean? It's chances are if you have a good piece of ground, like I said, sometimes you could be dealing direct to seller or the broker's not really advertising it, on CoStar or something like that. But typically brokers aren't going to just give it to one person either. You know what I mean? They want to make sure that they're getting it to somebody who can fund that kind of thing. So this is the kind of business where you do have to operate relatively quickly. Though sometimes when you're dealing with sellers, they might not be shopping it to a million different people, but they could be too. So it depends. Ideally, you want to keep about 10 deals or so in your pipeline at any given time. So you're kind of always actively scouting and looking for deals and having conversations with brokers and sellers, that kind of thing. So as we discussed, there's a number of things that can go wrong here. I'm not trying to say that this is, risk free. I think sometimes you see land investments, especially land entitlement. I see some people say, because you're not closing on the property, because you're using the builder's money to buy it, that kind of thing, because you're not pushing ground or building homes, you're taking away like all those kinds of risk and stuff. But it just like anything, it has its own set of potential risk, when it comes to, water, water sewer, geographical, geotechnical, which is the rocks and things like that and all, the zoning, people coming out and not wanting the project and getting pushback and that kind of thing. Like there's a number of things that, challenges that you're going to face along the way. The good thing is that for the most part, you know what they are. You know what I mean? And like I said before, it's a very incremental spend. So you're finding out these things before you're getting too far down the path, you know what I mean? To say, okay, oh, this project's not going to happen or something. Within the before getting into it and then within the due diligence period, you're finding out an awful lot, and you're not spending a whole lot of money in order to do it. So it's kind of this incremental, red light, green light kind of approach. And I'll just run through a few other ways that we mitigate the risk, and then we'll open it up to questions. So first and foremost, it goes back to just going after those infill projects. I mean, going where there's demand and not just where there's land. That's like just a basic, fundamental aspect of the way you want to look at it. Like I said before, there's a ton of pre and post acquisition due diligence that you're doing when your money's not hard yet. You know what I mean? So the market analysis, the 16-point risk analysis calculator, that's looking at the schools, the demand, just who the different players are in the space and all that kind of stuff. A number of different things. I'm happy to send that over as well if you'd like to see it and walk through that with you as well. So obviously there is, like I said before, there is no ownership. You're controlling the property through an agreement of sale. One of the big things here is like what happens if the market takes a big correction between now and when you go to sell it to the builder in 2 or 3 years. Well, it's good that you don't own the property at that point, and you can go back to renegotiate things. At that point, usually the owner is going to be pretty perceptible to that as well, because the way they're looking at it is it's if they're not perceptible to getting some kind of a price change or something like that, what's going to happen is what are they going to do? Like the market has changed. They're going to have to go back on market to find another buyer. The price is going to be reset at that point anyway. It's a new market now, so it's going to happen either way, and then it's going to get tied up in the approval process again for another 2 3 years or something like that. So you have a lot of control when you're controlling the property through the agreement, but not actually owning it. You don't have the expenses that are associated with the ownership. So like taxes and insurance and whatever other expenses may be incurred through the property. That's all on the seller until it's sold, to the builder at the end of the day. This is a no debt strategy as well. So this is these deals would be funded by 100% equity. So you don't have an interest rate burn or anything like that along the way. You don't have the debt risk. We kind of have a philosophy in avoiding the 5 Gs, which is guesswork, gut feeling. At the end of the day, you got to be data driven. You can't just go, oh, that you think, oh, this is a great piece of ground or the demand is there or something like that. It's the data has to show you that there's demand there, and that comes back to seeing the comps, seeing what other actions going on in the area, that kind of thing. The site itself, getting that due diligence done, and some of that initial engineering and things like that, having conversations with the municipality and stuff to see where they're at and if they're perceptible or not, that kind of thing. Gamesmanship is a big one. That kind of goes back to what Joe was saying before, like with the bids, like will they get into bidding wars and things like that? They definitely will on the builder side of things, but it could happen on the land side as well. If you get a really good piece of ground, the price can be getting driven up, and you want to know when to walk away. You want to be able to say, all right, this doesn't underwrite anymore. A big part of the risk calculator is kind of looking at what we talked about before, where we're not afraid to take on projects that have hair, but we want to be compensated for it. You know what I mean? It's got to be worth it for us from what the return perspective is. So ideally, you might be shooting for like a 2 to 3x on a project basis. If there's more hair, you want to see a lot more than that. If there's maybe less and it's a fully approved, fully buy right plan, all that kind of stuff that you're going to exit in 18 months or something, maybe you're at a 1.8 or on the 2 side of the spectrum, that kind of thing. So it's kind of deal by deal, depends. The return's going to depend on just how much hair or lack thereof does that specific project have. Like I said before, just focusing on infill projects, having multiple exit strategies. So talking to the nationals, the regionals along the way, looking at projects with GSP in the background there, seeing is this something that we would maybe want to build? Is this something that we could see as a long-term, buy and hold within our portfolio, that kind of thing. I thought a lot of times land developers don't have that construction experience. They have no interest in doing it. I think that's one thing that really sets us apart. And then it's like I was saying before, like the guy that I started with, the broker developer, he'd never do construction in a million years. But the good thing is you can set up agreements to do that as well, where you can build extensions in as well. That's another part of risk analysis, is just setting up the deal right from the get-go to build in some contingencies and things like that with getting extensions and stuff like that. That's another thing too. If the market shifts a little bit and the owner doesn't want to budge on price, you could just continue, to have extensions until the market shifts. And when it comes to like, that's where you also want to be in those infill high demand areas within the suburbs of Philadelphia and all, where they historically have not taken a very long time at all to recover if there is any downturn, that kind of thing. And then we have an awesome team behind us. I mean, over 20 years of land development experience, with experience working with the nationals, working with regional builders, doing everything along the process from acquisitions to managing the entitlement process to also managing site work and the improvements as well as the building of homes and stuff like that too. So I and then just real quick, you work with third party experts as well. So this development is a team sport, right? A lot of what we do is kind of as a conductor almost of getting really good people onto the team, local experts. That's another way that you can help to make things kind of move smoother when you are working with an engineer or you're working with attorneys or land planners that have experience working with that municipality and within that county, that kind of thing, because that could really make things move a lot quicker. Or if you maybe choose the wrong person, make things move a little bit slower, that kind of thing. So we're working with a number of attorneys, engineers, land planners, architects, title companies, surveyors, site contractors, banks, you name it. Kind of a screenshot here of a number, not even everybody, but just, some of the people that we work with. Each project's you're going to fill the right people in for each project, depending on where it's at, that kind of thing. So that's it.
Excellent stuff. Really good stuff and very thorough, man.
Hey, I try.
Up to the educational mission very well.
Definitely.
Yeah, we do have some questions.
Yeah.
I've got Igor or Igor says, "Hi Peter, thanks for offering to share the slides." And if you anyone who's listening or viewing would want to just pop Peter a quick email saying you'd like the slides, and I'm sure he would
Yeah.
send them back to you.
Send them over. And you know what, Joe, I'll say it out loud too, just in case somebody is listening or they got their transcription thing going. Uh, my phone number, feel free to call, text me, whatever is easiest for you. It's 610-357-2330. That's my cell phone. Hit me up whenever. Email is pneil. It's P is in Peter, and then Neil, Neill. There's two L's. A lot of times that gets lost in there. So two L's at gsprei.com. And then if you go to gsprei.com, all my info is on there. You can schedule time with me, that kind of thing. So definitely feel free to reach out. I can send you over whatever you'd like to see when it comes to the slides and underwriting and stuff like that.
Sure. And then Igor wants to know, would you please quickly go over the percentage of the out sale price that a lot should value at, specifically entitled versus horizontally developed? And that he goes, you way over my head on that one. Peter, I'm just gonna throw that
Well,
over the
there,
wall at you.
yeah. Well, like I said, it starts with the average sale price, on what is the home going to sell for, and then from there, the finish lot value. So if you were selling finished lots, typically going to fall between on average, it's going to be about 33%. If it's more tertiary, it could be a little bit lower, maybe 25, 28, something like that. If it's a very, very desirable property, it could be a little bit higher, upwards of high 30s. I don't know if you maybe see, upwards of 40, but it could be in the high 30s. So that's what the finished lots would sell for. And then the site improvement, you would back that out of, here's what the finished lots would sell for, back out the site improvement. So what it would cost for you to improve the lots, what it would actually cost to do the site work. If you back that out, that'll get you the approved lot value.
Okay. And you're getting the Igor, I hope that answers your question.
Well, if
The
it doesn't, I would say just
yeah,
schedule time. We
just
can
yeah,
walk through. We'll
call
pull it up on
call
Zoom
me.
and walk
Yeah.
through it together and all, because the visual. Sometimes you got to visualize, these kinds of things and concepts for it to sink in.
So yeah, as I understood it, the horizontally developed price is coming from the comps. That's your analysis, and you're plugging that in.
Exactly.
And
It's gonna be a percentage
cool.
of those comps and all. Like I said, on average about 33%, especially in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And then to get to the approved lot value, so just selling at record plan approval, you're just gonna back out the cost to finish those lots. And like I said, like that's from an underwriting perspective. We do it that way. What we're also doing is we're just calling Lennar and Toll, whoever's going to be interested in that project, if it's a local builder or something, calling them and asking them, what are you paying for approved lots in X township and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And they'll always tell you. Yeah, I mean, you can get a range.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll even give you an LOI, I mean, because they're going to want the property, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So that's a foolproof way to do it as well. You know what I mean? Just call and ask them.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and this is a question that I had, and several people have. Now, the investor opportunity is with a specific project, or is it the pool of projects that you're working on?
That's originally when we launched this, we wanted to launch it as a fund. And as time has gone on, I think we're going to be leaning more towards funding individual projects. The fund, as you could, and we could walk through this. I don't want to go back to sharing that thing. It'll take me too long to get it up. The fund, 5, 6 projects in the fund, we would need about, actually, like, we wanted to raise $10 million. It would be about $8.3 million in equity needed, which there's contingency built into that as well and all. I mean, which you have to have, you know what I mean? So that's a lot of money for us to secure right off the bat. Individual projects are typically going to be a few $100,000, maybe it could be $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 on the high end, like a large project like the State College one, which is 400 something units, it's a master plan style where there's singles and towns and apartments, which they're good projects. I mean, when you have different opportunities to sell and things like that, there's a lot of advantages to that. Instead of just selling one thing to a national builder, that was upwards of like a 1.6. We're negotiating that now to maybe $2 million in equity needed. So doing individual projects, it would be a lot less stressful for us to have to secure that capital to do the individual projects. So we're actually kind of leaning towards an individual project model right now compared to the fund. But we haven't 100%. We're still having some conversations with capital partners and all, especially on the larger side, to see what we could do in that sense. I think there's advantages to individual projects as well as advantages to the fund and being diversified through a few. But individual projects give investors the ability to kind of, if split money up between multiple projects, because no matter what, we still want to do about 5, 6 projects a year.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, this leads into the next question about investor, maximum, minimums, ROI, and time frame. One of our attendees is asking, and you had gone through some numbers on the spreadsheet that talked about the multiple and likely investor returns. Can
Yeah.
you walk through the investor experience on this? What's that like?
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to keep this presentation like just really
And
educational.
you
You know,
did
so I didn't,
great. You did great.
I
Yeah.
didn't, and God, I'd still be talking if I added that in too, right? So we're targeting a two X minimum to the investor. You know, I think there's a lot of opportunity to go well beyond that, but at the same time, I'd rather take a under promise and over deliver scenario. You know what I mean? So when we're doing our underwriting, we're typically going to go more towards seeing at least a 3x. And it's also, we're not really looking at it that way either, as much as we're looking at it as the project and looking at the risk associated. Like I was saying before, it's like typing everything into the risk analysis calculator there and seeing what kind of yield do we need to make here. Because there's projects where I would argue if it yielded an 8.6 or I'm sorry, an 8.6, a 1.6 or 1.8 to the investor, but the risk is much lower because it's a fully by right project. You know, it's going to be a very quick turnaround, maybe 18 months, kind of a thing before we're securing record plan approval. So it's going to vary, and if we're looking at things from an individual perspective, then it's going to vary greatly, but the investors would have all that information, and make a decision if they say this project's right for me or it's not. I mean, that kind of thing. But from a fund perspective, the way we were looking at that was we want to see at least a 2x minimum return and a 20 IRR, which also, a 20 IRR is factoring in, I think, 5 years or so. That's very, very conservative. On some of these projects, when you're making a 7x or something like that in 2 or 3 years, the IRR to the investor it's pretty high. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like I said, I very much taking the approach of under promising and over delivering. And if we're going the route of individual deals, all of that underwriting that you're seeing from a realistic standpoint of here's where the numbers are today and here's what we realistically see the comps at and what the site work would be and what we could sell a project for, building in some sensitivity into it as well, that kind of thing. All that would be presented to the investor. They can make a decision. And if we do the individual full discretion, it goes on them at that point, right? If we make a decision to do the individual projects compared to the fund, we were asking for $100,000 minimum in the fund. I would drop that down to probably 50 or maybe even 25. This way, like I said, investors, if they wanted to, could create kind of their own fund over a few different deals, as the plan is still to do 5, 6 deals a year.
Interesting. Okay, and I hope anonymous, that answers your question about investor maximum minimums, ROI and time frame. Robert wants to know if there's any depreciation or bonus depreciation pass through.
No. Unfortunately, there's really no tax advantages within raw land. There's no income coming in as it's raw. I mean, the income's coming from the sale of the approved projects, that kind of thing. That's why you want to accompany this kind of a strategy with like what we do with. We don't have tax advantages in our income fund either because that's kind of like a debt structure. But from an ownership perspective, when you own real estate, and that's why like we see this and kind of in our long-term vision of not only offering entitlement opportunities to our investors, but offering development opportunities where we're not going to just sell to a national builder, but we're going to continue to do the horizontal and the vertical in house. That's where you would be getting, if you stayed into that, you'd be getting those tax advantages, that kind of thing. One tax advantage on the land side would be it would be taxed as a long-term capital gain, because you're selling those projects over a period of 2 or 3 years on average, that kind of thing. So it wouldn't be taxed as ordinary income as you typically see, like in our income fund where it's a debt type structure. It's taxed as ordinary income. If you do it in an IRA as well, obviously there's those tax advantages, and also because it's not utilizing debt, you wouldn't be generating the UBIT potential that comes up sometimes with those
Good point.
IRAs when debt's in the mix.
Good point. Good point, UDFI. Yeah, good point. I think, and let me just use the scroll here, make sure I'm not missing anything. I think that's it. That's it for questions. This is great. And I appreciate you sticking to the educational mission. I really do.
Yes, definitely. No,
This is a really good look into this sliver of the real estate market.
well, as you said, I was surprised, when I brought this out to the audience and all, because it was almost split. I kind of thought, are people going to know about this or not? But there were a lot of people did know about it. I mean, a lot of my existing audience did have some experience with it, but I feel like a lot of the confusion has come where there's a lot of different strategies within land. So like we were talking about before, you're investing in land in a different way. I've talked to a number of other investors that are investing in land in different ways. So I thought keeping this educational and really understanding this strategy from a entitle and feed it to a builder to feed their pipeline, that kind of thing. This is a very specific strategy. And I would argue, I think this strategy creates the absolute most value because, like we said before, securing that entitlement is really what unlocks the value. I mean, raw land doesn't tend to have a whole lot of value until you can do something with it. You know what I mean? And the
Mm.
entitlement process is what gets you the approvals and secures what you can do with it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So just to go back to the other question, reach out to me if you have any questions or you want to talk specifically about the fund and what we're thinking with individual opportunities, that kind of thing. Just reach out. My contact info is on the screen there, gsprei.com. I'm happy to go over what we're thinking and kind of how that process would be and projections and all that kind of stuff one on one.
Peter, thank you so much for visiting with us today. And thanks to everyone. Our audience stuck with us the entire time, which is great. That means it's good stuff.
That's awesome.
Everyone
That all
have
right,
a
but that or they fell asleep with all my as I'm droning on.
that does
But thanks for
happen.
having me, Joe. I really, really
You're welcome.
appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody for listening. And do not hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to schedule time, or just call me or text me. If I don't pick right up, I'll certainly get back to you.
Okay, thanks to everyone who came today, and thank you, Peter, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.